Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Bellings and I'm a PhD student at CU Boulder. This talk will be about some of the work that I did with Dr. Chris Ray last fall towards developing a system for the automatic classification of Pika vocalizations using deep learning architectures. Pika vocalizations are comprised of several different types of calls that are used to communicate information about topics like their territory or to warn others of predators. For example, a short call might sound like this. Okay, so how can analyzing these sounds be useful to us? Acoustic monitoring, or bioacoustics, can help provide data to study population dynamics, behavioral and evolutionary patterns, and on a broader scale, the possible effects of climate change, especially due to the pika's need for high-altitude alpine habitats. For example, some broad questions that acoustic data can be used to address include: is there a relationship between the frequency and type of pika calls and population stability? Or are there behavioral patterns that we can observe and quantify, such as the tendency of different calls and different individual behaviors to occur at different times of the day? The first step to build the call classification model was to process the recorded data. Raw data from files stored by audio recording units placed in several sites in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, such as the audio moth unit pictured below, was imported from several files into RStudio, which was used for code development. Some R packages that were useful for this project include the Bioacoustics, Keras, and C-Wave packages. Threshold-based detection was then used to find, extract, and store as samples certain parts of the audio file that were likely to be a pika call based on factors like the expected frequency, amplitude, and duration of a typical pika call. This would result in samples such as visualized in the spectrogram and amplitude plot on the right. The fingerprint that you see in the spectrogram on top shows the frequency composition of the call, while the plot on the bottom shows the changes in amplitude of the call, both over time. Finally, the samples were manually validated. This essentially means that I listened to each saved sample to ensure that it was correctly identified as a short or long pika call by the threshold-based audio detection step. Noises that were incorrectly extracted were labeled in an other category used for the model in the next step. Generally speaking, neural networks used for classification need to be trained on many examples of each class or category to have accurate classification performance. The objective is to classify pre-recorded noises as long calls, short calls, or as other noise, where other is a category to separate samples previously extracted in threshold-based detection that were incorrectly identified as pika calls. By including this category in training, we can see how well the neural network may differentiate non-pika noises from actual calls. To train the 5-layer convolutional neural network model used, samples were sorted into categories for training, validation, and testing. The model was then trained and validated using the former two data subsets. This step is essentially a statistical optimization problem. The next step was to test the neural network and see how well it would perform on the testing data set. There were 57 total samples used for testing, with 36 short calls, 12 other noises, and only 9 long calls. As you can see by the confusion matrix on the left, long calls were correctly classified only 11% of the time, where other noises were correctly classified 75% of the time, and short calls were correctly classified 97% of the time. Given the small number of samples, results showed decent performance on 3-class classification of pika calls, but there's a lot more that could be done here. The next step is the assembly of a fully labeled dataset of audio files including location, time, and call type. At the time of the research, there are 682.3 gigabytes total of collected data, but only a small percentage of this was processed due to computational and time constraints, so using more of the data could result in better performance by using it in the training data set. Additionally, other neural network architectures like pre-trained models could result in much better performance. Thanks for listening to my talk, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me.